Let's face it, Baylor basketball has not lived up to expectations since winning the national championship in 2021.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Nissan. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys tuning in today. We're going to be talking a lot of basketball, okay? And it's not going to be an easy one. We're going to talk about how this program, men's program, I should say, has not lived up to expectations since 2021 and what they need to look towards and what they should be striving towards. Plus, one of their only experienced players who is set to come back next year has hit the transfer portal. How do the Bears react to that? And we'll get specific about the questions that surround the women's basketball program as well. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. I'm going to start with this, guys. This is not going to be a rah-rah pep rally type of Locked On Baylor episode. I think I'm going to be fair in my assessments. I'm going to try to provide solutions or at least things to look towards in order to kind of make sense of all this. But this is not going to be like the nicest show I've ever done. I think we need to talk about what has happened to the basketball programs at Baylor in quick succession. Is specifically the men's program and what needs to change and what Baylor should be striving for. I think that's the most important thing here. We don't want to just dump for the sake of dumping. You know, we want to think of solutions and at least think of things that Baylor should be aspiring to be, because there are plenty of fans who are okay with where Baylor's at as an athletic department because 40 years ago, 30 years ago, they were awful at everything. And then we're just okay with that. I personally don't think that way. I'm a spoiled Baylor fan. I'm well aware of this. I've been a Baylor fan for just about a decade here. I've experienced some of the biggest successes that this athletic department has ever seen. And I totally understand that. I also understand how oxymoronic it can sound to hear that, oh, they haven't lived up to expectations since winning the national championship, because just about any program anyone who hasn't won one would chop their right arm off for a national championship in basketball. And there's certainly some long-standing, close to blue blood programs that have done a lot of winning in the course of their history, more winning than Baylor, but have not won the big prize that Baylor has. So let me start by saying that they'll never take 2021 away from us. But I don't like that we can't have expectations anymore because they won a national championship. To me, it should be the opposite. The expectation should go up. You have proven that you can win a national championship. And that 2021 team is one of the great teams of this century. I'm not saying you need to be national championship contenders every year, but you need to get out of the first weekend. In the last 4 years, they haven't been able to do that. Twice in the last 8 years, they've made it out of the first weekend. That's it. Now, one of them was a national championship, which is pretty great. But the fact that they have not built on that momentum at all is odd. It's odd because you look at these other programs that make, Final Four runs, and of the Power Four teams, Baylor's really the only one in recent memory that has not kind of capitalized on that. What I mean by capitalized on is getting back to that second weekend, Sweet 16, Elite 8, because I'm not saying Baylor should be competing for a national championship every year, but there's no reason they can't be Michigan State. I've sifted through college basketball programs the last 24 hours to think of the best example I can think of, and Michigan State, to me, is the best example. They've got a Hall of Fame head coach, Tom Izzo. Baylor has one too, and Scott Drew. He's a Hall of Fame caliber coach. I don't want him fired. I want him here leading this group. And somewhat early on for Tom Izzo, they won the national championship in the year 2000. They have not won the national championship in the quarter century since. Baylor has won a national championship in 2021, obviously have not won one since. But what Michigan State has done is a lot different from what Baylor's done. In the smaller sample size, in the 4 years since the national championship, Baylor has not made it to a Sweet 16. In the 25 years since Michigan State last won their national championship, they have done as follows. They have made the tournament every single year. They have made the Sweet 16 13 times. They have made the Elite Eight 8 times. They've made the Final Four 6 times. And they've won the Big Ten regular season title 8 times. That's what we talk about building off momentum. They have not won a national championship in 25 years. That's probably disappointing to the fans in East Lansing, but they are still one of the models of consistency in college basketball and still one of the danger programs when March Madness comes around. Tom Izzo and Scott Drew, there's not a lot separating them in terms of what they can do in their coaching ability and the way they've built their programs when they've been successful is very similar. And there's no reason that Baylor can't aspire to be that. That's what I'm looking at. I'm not saying, hey, you've got to be Duke now. I'm not saying you've got to be Kansas. I'm not saying you've got to be UConn. But Michigan State, what they've done since they've won the national championship without winning the thing again is pretty damn impressive. In fact, they've played in one national championship game since then. Like, that body of work is very impressive. And to look at another one that is going to piss off some Baylor fans here is Gonzaga. Why can't Baylor have a program like Gonzaga? Now, again, Gonzaga, would they chop off their right arm for the national championship in 2021? Absolutely, they would. And at the end of the day, would you pick a national championship over that? Yes, you would. But since Mark Few got there, because I'm looking at Gonzaga because, Michigan State's established. They had won a national championship in 79. They were a big-time program by the time Tom Izzo got there. Scott Drew, very different, right? I mean, it's the worst situation ever to walk into in college basketball. The situation that Mark Few walked into in Gonzaga in the late 90s was not that much different. Okay? They had no success, no team success. They had John Stockton, but no team success. And since Mark Few has gotten there, in the 25 years that he's been there, they've made the Sweet 16 14 times. They've made the Elite Eight 6 times, and they've made 2 Final Fours. There's no reason that Baylor can't be that kind of program. Gonzaga's in a nothing conference. That's why I'm not mentioning their conference championships because they win it all the time. It's pretty easy. Baylor would be doing that if they were in that conference. They recruit nationally. They don't have a large enrollment. They're not a big state school. And they have a coach, once again, who's very similar to Scott Drew. And yet they win a lot more. They go deeper in March than Baylor does consistently. And of course, the tail of the tape for Scott Drew, 5 Sweet 16s, 3 Elite Eights, a Final Four, and a national championship. That's a hell of a resume. It is. But we're kidding ourselves if we're not saying that Baylor has not lived up to the expectations that we would have had after the 2021 season. I don't think anyone was thinking back-to-back national championships. I don't think anyone was realistically thinking Villanova, 2 and 3 years or a 3 and 4 year type of thing. No, we weren't expecting that. But we were also not expecting to be out in the first weekend each of the next 4 years. And 4 years later, for it to be looking somewhat bleak as we look into the 2025-26 season. I trust Scott Drew. I trust that he's got this program in a good position. But yeah, it's not been good enough since 2021. Baylor would do well to be Gonzaga or Michigan State and be a powerhouse in college basketball rather than a one-off. But let me know what you guys think. Whatever your opinion is, let me know in the comments below, whether it's nice or not. And then be sure to like and subscribe because we're going to be talking a lot of Baylor basketball and then looking more towards some Baylor football in the next couple of days as well. We'll talk some more about this current team because they are subtracting one of their veteran leaders. We'll tell you who's hitting the transfer portal and why. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From the top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. Now, this team does not have a national championship recently like Baylor does, but they do win a lot in March. This week's Armada clear-cut team of the week is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games and losing to Baylor, Coach Cal's Hogs have fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball, well, one of them, to not only make the NCAA tournament, but to knock off Rick Pitino en route to the Sweet 16. They accomplished this without their second leading scorer, Boogie Flan, for most of the SEC season, and without their leading scorer and rebounder, Adu Thiero, for so far here, I guess, in the NCAA tournament. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure at shopnissanusa.com. The big breaking news on Monday is that Langston Love, three-year impact player at Baylor, is hitting the transfer portal in a huge blow to Scott Drew's 2025-26 team. There was some speculation about this from fans. There were obviously rumors that came out during the year about Langston Love, his injury history, whether he could play or not, whether he was cleared to play, NIL stuff. There was all kinds of buzz, and Langston did not let it bother him. He came back into the fold and was a huge impact player for Baylor down the stretch. That was like the one thing that didn't go wrong down the stretch was that Langston Love didn't get hurt again. You know, he was held out in the Big 12 tournament, and then he came in and put together 2 pretty good performances in the NCAA tournament and was a big reason why they knocked off Mississippi State in the first round. But Langston Love, he's going to find a new team. He is entering the portal. It's been an interesting career for Love at Baylor, right? He came in as, a big-time high school recruit coming out of Texas, and then I believe at Montverde, was a big-time high-volume scorer, blew out his ACL his first year, and that was a big loss for Baylor. I think they were expecting him to contribute right away, and when he is on the floor, he is actually a throwback to what Scott Drew's teams looked like 8 or 10 years ago. Right? He's not the most skilled player in the world. He's probably more skilled than people give him credit for. But he's big. He plays bigger than he is. He's a physical player. He can get after it at both ends of the floor. He can score inside and outside. Like that to me sounds a lot like kind of the Baylor players of yesteryear. I'm thinking of King McClure, Al Freeman, even Terry Maston, who played a different position, right? Sounds a lot like those guys. Ish Wainwright, even though Wainwright, different position, bigger guy, but had all of those traits. And that's, again, a huge blow to the team next year because he was one of the few guys that was coming back and that's been in this program for a couple of years, who's kind of been in the trenches, been through the battles. And we're starting to see a lot of this in the transfer portal, both in football and basketball, of guys who are like, and I'm guessing that Langston is in this field of no hard feelings. I've kind of run my course here. I'm going to go try and be a part of something somewhere else while I finish my college career. I think we have seen that, versus what LJ Cryer was doing of, I want to go somewhere else. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go and play a different position. I want to go play for a different coach. That kind of thing. I think Langston is more the former case than the latter. And I think there is going to be, an instant, like a thought for Baylor fans looking back that he just never really panned out to what he could have been. And that is mostly due to injury. Like he was a guy averaging double figures last year off the bench before he got hurt in early January. And that would have been a huge lift for Baylor, and specifically that team in 23-24, which absolutely looked like one that could make a deep run. He was shooting 48% from 3 in 23-24, 11 points a game, and wasn't starting. Like he was such a big impact guy for them. And again, he never plays. The last 2 years, he does not play more than 25 games. He did play 30 in 22-23, but was just kind of easing himself back into things for most of that year. And in the 20 games this year, 9 points a game, over an assist per game, almost 3 rebounds, shot it well at 39%, not great, but fit right in with this team. And again, he's a guy who you now have to replace his leadership, the intangible stuff, not just the points and the rebounds, but the fact that he's been in this locker room and played for this coaching staff for the last couple of years. Because you look at the situation and what it is for Baylor and who they're bringing back, now in the not coming back pile that are definites, you've got Norchad Omier, Jeremy Roach, Jaden Nunn, VJ Edgecombe, Jalen Celestine, and Langston Love. That's a lot to replace. That's even worse than last year. And the rest of the rotation guys that could be coming back, you would think Josh O would, definitely. You would think Marino Dubravcic would, obviously. And then Rob Wright, I think we're hopeful, but that's a question mark. And if you even include this guy as a rotation guy, Jason Asamoah is a question mark. So once again, we're doing this song and dance of, hey, you've got to replace, 4 of your 5 starters, or in this case, for some of your rotations, all 5 starters. That's where you miss Langston Love the most. Not just a guy who can get hot quickly off the bench, not just a guy who can guard a couple of different positions, but a guy who's had experience with this team and would have been a crucial part of integrating, these new guys into the team and into the Baylor basketball culture. But honestly, maybe that's a reason he's looking to do something else. He sees how much they have to replace this year, kind of how things went in the locker room and on the floor this year. And he might be thinking, you know what? I have a chance to go and play a place somewhere else for a year that could be contending for a conference championship and a Final Four. And he might be saying, I don't know if that's the case at Baylor. That's not a report. That's purely speculation. But that's a tough loss for Baylor. But it is a weird career to look back on, much like LJ Cryer's is for different reasons, because you think of what could have been. And you think from Baylor's standpoint, like, how much were you going to count on him next year? Like, how many games were you penciling him in for? Because through no fault of his own, there's always something. There's always something up with him. The difference between Langston Love and Marcus Smart was Marcus Smart didn't start getting hurt until he played in the NBA. Both those guys have a similar skill set. They play the game a similar way. They have one speed. They play it all out. And unfortunately, it's led to some injuries for Langston Love. But certainly wishing him the best. He's a guy who's never had a bad word to say about Baylor yet. So wishing him the best. But that's a tough loss in day one of the offseason for Scott Drew, because the challenge for next year's roster was daunting already. And it gets even more daunting with Langston Love not being a part of that, both on the court and in the locker room. Interested to see where he lands. But let me know what you guys think about this loss. Let me know in the comments below. Is this a huge one for Baylor next year? Were you not counting on him very much anyway for next year? And what does Baylor need to look at in the transfer portal? Because we're going to be talking positions. We're going to be talking names in the coming days. So let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're bringing you exclusive Baylor content, exclusively Baylor content, Baylor sports content every day on YouTube and then wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Baylor rolls on. We're going to get into the specifics of what questions we are asking of this Baylor women's basketball program. That is coming up next on Locked On Baylor.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is also brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades at Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast and from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now, it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. So we obviously know that it was a tough afternoon on Sunday for Baylor men's basketball first and then Baylor women's basketball second. They both get bounced in the second round. And I put out there and talked about it on the show as well, that I think there's some questions surrounding both these programs, but looking at the women's program with how they've performed in high pressure games recently and really in the whole Nikki Collin era, there are some questions to be asked here. Because I think last year, we had some high expectations for the team that didn't necessarily come to fruition, although they did make the Sweet 16. And then this year, there was a couple different times where it looked like the women's team could win not only the Big 12 championship, but could make a deep run in March. And neither of those things happened. They lost 2 Big 12 championship games, and they got upset on their own home floor in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So I put out there that there need to be questions asked. A lot of you Baylor fans didn't like that. Didn't like that on Twitter. People were jumping to the conclusion that I thought Nikki Collin should be fired. I obviously clearly said it in the segment that Nikki Collin, I don't think she should be fired. Now, if they have a bad season next year or they don't live up to expectations, that's a different story. But as we sit here in 2025, I still like Nikki Collin. I still think she should have this job. You can ask questions of a program and you can be disappointed in a team without saying the coach needs to be fired. So I didn't think I was going to have to clarify that, but according to you fans who I make this for, I'll have to clarify that. And some of you asked, okay, what are those questions? And that's a fair question in and of itself. So let's look at some of the specific questions that I have about Baylor women's basketball that does not include, is this the right coach? Because right now I think she is the right coach. First thing, are we investing enough money? This was an interesting question to me, but one that I think needs to be addressed because a couple of years ago, there was no doubt that Baylor was investing a ton of money into women's basketball, more than almost any major university in the country. Even with as good as the women's program was, it doesn't make money. And yet Baylor was pouring a ton of resources into that for coaching, facilities, recruiting. Okay, that was no doubt. But the last 2 or 3 years, the women's game has ascended. It has taken off. And we have seen the power of NIL and what schools are putting heavy resources into their women's basketball program and how it can change things. LSU wasn't anything to write home about before Kim went there. And they invested in a Hall of Fame coach, and she brought them a national championship in short order. Look up the road. Look at the team you lost to in the 2 Big 12 championship games this year. TCU was nothing on the women's basketball map. They invested in a good coach and Mark Campbell. They have put out good NIL deals for Sedona Prince and Haley Van Lith, and they don't have a ton around them. They've got the 3-point shooter, but they don't have a ton around those 2 players, and they're in the Sweet 16, and they're the Big 12 regular season and conference champions. They're the standard bearers for this year. So now it needs to be asked, what you were investing was good enough in the past. Is it good enough right now? And is it worth it to go even more into the resources, into the money that you pour into this program? That's one question we can ask without saying the coach needs to be fired. Another one, how is Baylor women's basketball utilizing the portal? Because they've dipped into it quite a bit over the last 2 seasons, and every move looked pretty good on paper, but they're not all created equal. And you look at one this year in Aaliyah Matharu, who was an all SEC player, comes in the middle of the season. That's a tough ask. She comes in December, starts playing games at the end of December, and she had some moments here and there, but it feels like she never quite found her footing and didn't quite have the role that some of us thought she would have on this team. So that's an easy one to chalk up to, midway through the season. That's a tough one. It's difficult to hold that against anyone. But then you also look at a Dre Edwards, who came in from Kentucky, had the eligibility issue the first year. So she's, redshirting essentially that entire year of 22-23. And then when she is on the floor in 2024, all of her production numbers are down from when she was at Kentucky. Every single one. And so you're like, wow, that's not the all SEC player we thought we were getting. Aaronette Vonleh somewhere in the middle. She had a good season. And so if you're dipping into the transfer portal well that much for starters, you need to make sure that they're all going to fit into the system and that they're all going to contribute. It's the same question that the men's team has, same one. But they need to identify what kind of player they're looking for in the portal and what kind of term they are looking for in a player in the portal. Both the men's program and the women's program need to do that. Is it the right play style? Because it's easy on the eyes, the kind of Nikki Collin ball and the up and down the floor stuff. But you look at the teams that have beaten them the last couple of years, and specifically this past year with TCU and Ole Miss, they had really high volume scoring backcourts and high volume scoring combo guards. And Baylor sometimes got that from Jada Walker. They rarely got that from Sarah Andrews. And Yaya Felder is a shooting guard, not necessarily a combo guard. And they didn't really get that from Aaliyah Matharu. So is that the way they need to go? It looked like for sure all they needed was a post going into this year, but the play style's a little bit different. And do they need, a more athletic post when you look at someone like Sedona Prince, who could knock down jumpers, who was an excellent rim protector because she was long and very athletic and can really deter shots at the rim, not just blocking them, but keeping people out of the paint. Is that what you need from a post player? Because honestly, if you look back at the Mulkey era, she had a little bit of both, right? She had Brittany Griner, who was more like a Sedona Prince. She was the best player in college basketball. But she also had Kalani Brown, who was a lot like Nettie Vonleh, and Lauren Cox, who was a little bit of both. So that's something that, maybe they do have the right play style, but do they have the right personnel for it? Is this what's going to win in college basketball year in, year out? The last question I have goes into hand in hand with talking about the Kim Mulkey era. Is the Baylor women's basketball program too much in their own head? Are they too much in their own shadow? Like I said about the men's program, to expect them to be a national championship team every year is too much to ask. To expect the women's team to be what they were under Kim Mulkey, which was one of the top 3 or 4 teams in college basketball every single year, is a bit too much to ask for. But there's a big gap between that and losing on your home court in the second round and being out in the second round 3 of the last 4 years, twice on your home court. There's a big difference between those two things. And I'm wondering, is Baylor too much in their own head of needing to be a Final Four team, needing to be a national championship team? Are the players and the coaches listening too much to dummies like me or plenty of fans who are saying, well, they're not what they were when Kim Mulkey was there, or, hey, we're going to go and support LSU now because we're Kim Mulkey people? I think that part's stupid. But are they buying into too much of that, of, golly, we're just not a Kim Mulkey team? Because you're not a Kim Mulkey team, and that's okay. You can be a very good college basketball program without A, being coached by Kim Mulkey, and without B, going to the Final Four, every other year or so. You don't need to be that, or the Elite Eight every year, which is what they did. So those are the questions that I have about women's basketball, none of which are, is Nikki Collin the right coach? Should they fire Nikki Collin? Do they need to look elsewhere? Those are not the questions I have. But we do need to start asking questions of this program if they consistently don't get out of the first weekend, the same way we ask the men's basketball program those questions. That's all. You asked for clarifying the questions. I'm happy to do so. Let me know what questions you have or what else you think about this women's basketball program in the comment section below. The state of both of these college basketball programs, men's and women's at Baylor. Let me know what you think they are. Let me know what you think they should be in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube. And then they're going wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you guys so much for following along and making it your first listen today and every day. I appreciate the heck out of you. We're going to start talking about some spring football plus transfer portal for basketball. It's already hot and heavy. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode of your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.